Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the 3, 2, 1 Leadership Podcast with me, Pastor Jeff. It is my joy and honor to spend this time with you, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. The thing about this podcast is we are always working together to grow in our leadership, find our current ceiling, and break through it to find a whole new world of leadership to live in and to lead in and to do life in. And this podcast is helping me grow in my leadership probably more than it's helping all of you because of all the time I get to spend dedicated to studying and writing content for you. And so thank you for helping me get better in my leadership. And I'm hoping that it does the same for you. And with that being said, I'd really love it if you'd like, comment, share. I'd really like to see more comments. I hear verbally when I run into people how helpful it is. I'd love to see some of the specific lessons in the comments as we go. Today, though, we are going to do an episode that's a two-parter. We're going to talk about communication, clarity, and collaboration. This one's going to be a little short because I want it to be just really focused on a few things. And then the next episode will fill in a lot of the gaps that you might feel. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about clarity, communication, collaboration, but we're also talking about the A to Z training, which this is kind of a series on the A to Z. And today we're going to talk about just clarity and communication very specifically. What happens with A to Z is A represents the beginning of an organization or the team within the organization. So the organization could be 50 years old, and then you have a brand new team within the organization. So the organization might be farther along, but the team might be at A, brand new. And then the different letters represent progress towards the fulfillment of the organization's purpose and vision. I'm sharing that with you because in the very beginning, when something's new or small, or kind of in its infancy. Let me say it this way. When something's new or something's small, communication matters, but a lot of times you can get away with underperformance in communication or poorer. You can get away with poorer communication when things are small or new than you can when things grow. What happens is when something's new or when something's small, excitement, love covers a multitude of sins, they say. Excitement can cover a multitude of miscommunications. Okay, when something's new, a lot of people are excited enough that they overlook or don't even notice the poor communication, and so you can get away with things. And when something's small, then a lot of people are close enough that they can assume the best of you or kind of guess what you mean and figure it out. But as things grow and scale and get bigger and get more complex, or even more distributed, clarity and clear communication becomes like oxygen. You need it to survive. And so I believe that growing communication should almost be like a hobby because as your life and your family and your friendships and your leadership and your everything grows, there's a good chance that your communication needs to grow along with it. So it's almost like growing communication should just be everybody's hobby, in my opinion. And what happens is a lot of times when I talk to people about growing their communication, it's really easy to jump to the idea that just means I need to say more. I need to be clearer. That means I need to say more. But saying more might not make you clearer. It might just make you longer or louder. Long-winded or louder is what could happen if you just say more. And so I want you to understand is that saying more doesn't make you clearer. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you wrote one sentence and you should have written two. Okay, so sometimes it does, but a lot of times saying more doesn't make you clearer. Saying the right words makes you clearer. That's worth repeating. Saying more doesn't make the communication clearer. Saying the right words makes the communication clearer. Okay, you can hear the difference, right? Saying the right words might make a sentence a little bit longer or have, when you go a little bit deeper into what you were trying to say, but just because you say more doesn't mean you're being clear. I know people can ramble for 10 minutes at a time and say far less than somebody who talks for 30 seconds about the same topic, right? Because more doesn't always mean clearer. And so then what's important to understand in this principle is good communication is more about precision than it is about volume or length. Clear communication is more about precision than volume or length. And then the other part of this is clarity isn't accidental. It's what it is clarity is edited. Okay? Clarity is edited. That's the real discipline of communication. It's editing your thoughts and your words in various formats. And it's something I'm actually working on in my daily life. I'm learning that as I am comfortable with people in my closer circles, my team, my family, I can slip into what I call having an ADHD moment with them. And I'm really ADHD and I'm unmedicated for it. And so sometimes my head is just a crazy place to be. And when I'm really comfortable with people, I can find myself, we say I like to word vomit. And it's like my mouth and my brain are having a race to see which one can accomplish more in a moment. And I'm trying to get better at catching myself early on in the word vomit rather than later on in the word vomit. And what a powerful illustration, right? And so sometimes when I catch myself, I have a couple catchphrases. And when I say catchphrases, me catching myself. I'll say, why did I say that? I'll start rambling about something and I'll say, why did I say that? What I'm trying to say is, and I'm pausing. And what's happening is you're watching me edit from first draft to second draft real time. I spent 3 minutes talking about, I don't know, parking teams, which led me to talk about traffic cones, which led me to talk about signs, which led me to talk about vests, which led me to talk about a shirt store, an unrelated thing. And I'm going to catch myself before I drift into a completely other topic. And I say, why did I say that? Well, because I really liked your idea for a parking team, right? And you can kind of see my example there. And don't think too much of it. I'm trying not to have an ADHD moment with you right now. But I'm trying to slow down enough to make my words matter and not just empty my mind so that all my thoughts are vomited out. This is my point, is editing your thoughts and your words to do kind of what the Bible teaches in James 1 is to be slow to speak and quick to listen can create clearer communication. So do that. And then I want to add to this principle. First part is more words does not create clearer communication. The right words creates clearer communication. One of the ways you're going to find that is what I call second drafts. The reality that I try to live by in my leadership in my life is I almost never give anybody a first draft in anything. I almost never give people a first draft of a document or of a text or of an email or of social media. And I try really hard to not give people first drafts of my own thoughts. Why? Well, thoughts are where emotion lives, and then second drafts are where clarity begins. And what I find happening is when I skip the second draft and I give people the first draft, I'm less clear and I'm likely to create unnecessary conflict or stress. One of the best examples I have is like my assistant is really good at reading my mind. When I say, hey, I need this done, or hey, I need that done, she's really good at reading my mind, except when she's not. And when I give her, and she wants to do a really good job. And so when I give her a first draft, she either has a question she needs to come ask me that she doesn't want to ask because she feels like she should have been able to figure it out, or she does it and then I have her change something and she wouldn't have had to change it if I would have been clearer the first time. And that stresses her out because she is such a high performer and likes to do such a good job. Sophie, I love you. You do a great job. And our whole team is so blessed by you. And that's the reality is I cause chaos in people's lives. And it's not just me being a bad communicator. It's actually a lot of people, maybe most people. Because what did we say when we started? Most people are worse communicators than they think they are. And the greatest communicators in the world will also say the same things about themselves. They're less effective at communicating than they think they are. And so they're going to always work harder to communicate better. And so second draft your everything, your thoughts, your emails, everything. And this is a thought that maybe helps you really grasp that and internalize it. First drafts serve me. Second drafts serve others. Or final drafts serve others. Maybe you want to do third or fourth draft. But first drafts serve me and final drafts serve others. Why do I say that? Well, see, a first draft serves you because it's the quickest way to get your thing done and off your project list. You serve others by getting it done and then spending time making it clearer and kinder for those people that you're serving. So clarity is kindness. First drafts serve me, final drafts serve others. And a lot of times when you do that, when you do a second draft, maybe an email or something, and I've gotten my fair share of first draft emails from people that I'm like, good grief, we do not know what the heck you're talking about because this is clearly first draft. Clarity takes humility because it requires you to say, hey, there's a good chance I wasn't as clear as I wanted to be, even though I feel really good and passionate about whatever I said or whatever I wrote or whatever I expressed. But I'm going to think through it and polish it up and make sure that it's even clearer than I feel like it is. I want to be very self-aware, and I want to take you on a rabbit trail right now with intention. And what I'm doing right now is I am being very intentional. I'm modeling. There's a complex conversation. We've had 2 points in this conversation. I am in the second point still. I'm rabbit trailing from the second point to give you a lesson within the lesson that will come back and make you better at doing the second point. So that's what I'm doing. I'm giving you a complex conversation, but I'm over communicating to try to be clear and kind so you don't feel like you don't know what the heck we're talking about in this lesson on communication. So here's the rabbit trail. And this is going to empower you to figure out how to get good second drafts. Then we'll go back to what I hope feels like a mini communication masterclass. So in order to get good at your second drafts, you need to figure out what kind of processor you are. Different people process things different way, and there's a semi-good chance that some of you don't know what kind of processor you are. So some people are internal processors. You think about things or you hear things or whatever, you process it internally, and then you naturally write a first draft and a second draft, and then there you go. My wife is terrific at that. Some people are written processors. You don't process it as well internally. You actually need to get it out of your head. And by writing it, you actually form your thoughts better. There's strengths and weaknesses to each of these, but I don't want to get lost in the weeds of the conversation. So you can figure that out on your own. But some written processors, you're better at figuring out what you think when you write it. Some people are verbal processors. That's me. I'm a written processor, but I'm really a verbal processor. If I can just word vomit things and say everything, my brain sometimes figures out what I'm thinking while I say it, and then I hear myself say it, and then I reprocess it, and then I know what the heck I'm talking about. So some people are verbal processors. Some people are visual processors. You need a whiteboard. You need to just draw it, sticky note, flow chart, whatever. You need something that's your happy place. You need to see it. And then when you see it, then you're like, oh, it all makes sense. And that's why if you've ever had a meeting with me, I usually carry a pen or a Sharpie in my pocket, and I'll draw our conversations, because I know it's really helpful for a lot of people to see it. And so I have actually my own drawing techniques for how I can draw a conversation upside down while I'm talking to somebody. That's for you, because I love you. Some of us are collaborative processors, so you need some back and forth to process thoughts and ideas. Collaboration is good. Our next episode, part 2 of this, will be about collaboration. Some of you are kinetic or experiential processors. If you're an experiential processor, you maybe need to do something to understand it or to figure out the idea. Some people are auditory processors. It's good if you hear it. And if you don't always have a person available, I would recommend getting an AI that will say things to you. Type it out and have it say it back to you, and you can listen and think through it. Some people are reflective or spiritual processors. And if you know anything about my view on life, I will highly encourage everybody to pray about the things you process. Most things I think are worth praying for. And so those are some types of processing. I want to go a little bit farther into this rabbit hole, and then we're going to come back. Some people skip processing altogether because you're too busy or you're lazy. And I just want to call that out and just have that issue out in the air to address. If you're too busy to do a second draft, then you are too busy to lead at the next level. But some people are not too busy. They're lazy. And I'm just saying, if that's you, don't be lazy in your communication, because communication is one of the number one barriers to greatness. It really is. It really is. Poor communication is one of the most limiting barriers to greatness. And there's greatness in you. So this applies to not just your team or your workplace, applies to your marriage, your parenting, your friendship, life itself gets better when you become a better communicator. I would go pretty far on this. I would even say, as I'm processing this content, that a lot of people I know are the worst communicators with the people closest to them. And I mentioned probably part of this throughout the podcast already. The people closest to you are really good at interpreting what you're saying. And so a lot of times they assume the best of you, they fill in the gaps, and then they figured it out, but they didn't figure it out because you were good at communicating. A lot of times they figure it out because they're good at interpreting. And a lot of times our relationships can like massively upgrade in health if we make sure we're not lazy or complacent in our communication with those close to us. I gave you the example a little bit ago about myself and my assistant. My assistant and her husband and my wife, we're all very close friends. And so we, even outside of work, we're really close. And so the four of us spend a lot of time together as couples. And because of that, it's really easy for me to be a lazy communicator with her. And I work really hard to make sure that I'm a clearer communicator. And that's against my nature because I know she can figure it out. I often find my nature trying to revert back to lazy communicator. So I'm telling you, the people closest to you, even like your spouse, your kids, a lot of times they're better at interpreting than you are communicating. And so the things I'm talking about in this episode, if you really dig deep, can really help. All right, that was a rabbit trail with a purpose. So far, I want to reframe the conversation. We're talking about A to Z. Early on, when things are small or new, communication matters, but you can get away with bad communication because people can figure things out when they're close to you or when they're excited. As things grow and mature, things get more complex. So you either have to interact with more departments or a bigger team. And so communication needs to get better. In order to do that, you need to understand, number one, saying more does not mean clearer communication. Saying the right things means clearer communication. And saying the right things sometimes means saying more. Saying the right things sometimes means trimming to say less. Number two, you need to give second draft thoughts. When you give second draft thoughts, you give yourself and the people you're communicating with, whether verbal or written or wherever, you're giving them clearer communication. You will be better at giving second draft thoughts if you understand how you process things. So I gave you a list of ways to process, figure out which one you are, and then process things with people that way. What I'm not saying, I want to be very clear, what I'm not saying is that you need to go and write a rough draft. I'm not saying you're hanging out with your people, you're in a meeting and you have a thought and you don't know what your thought is. So you're a writing processor. So you have to leave the meeting and go write it down and write a second draft thought. I'm not saying it's that extreme, but I'm saying as a general principle, maybe in a meeting, you write your thought out before you say it aloud and you read your thought and you even tell your team, hey, I have a thought. I need to write it for a minute. Can you guys bear with me? And then they will let you process it, and then you can figure it out together. Or if you've been in a meeting with me and you're in maybe my inner circle, sometimes I will tell you, hey guys, I'm just going to word vomit for a minute, and then we're going to put it together because I can't figure out how to say it yet. And if I can tell them that before I word vomit, then they can be prepared to help me process it because they love me and they want to help me process it. Right? So it's very helpful to understand how you process. And then through there, find your second draft thought. There is significantly more to say on this topic. This topic will show up in other episodes. For example, we have part 2 coming out next month. And then one of our episodes will be on systems. So communication needs a system. Eventually, as your leadership grows and your life grows, you will benefit from having a communication strategy. So these are things you can start thinking about ahead of time that aren't in this episode. And there's substantially more to say about it. But what I want to say right now is a lot of leadership pain is actually a communication pain in disguise. That's the reality. A lot of leadership pain, a lot of leadership challenges are actually communication pains in disguise. So sometimes your leadership pain is you have a underperforming person, but really they're underperforming because they haven't been communicated clear expectations on what they need to do, or they don't know how to communicate the thing that they're not understanding. You will have a system that seems broken, and maybe it's broken maybe because there's a department that should be included in the conversation and they're not receiving the communication or the confusion or whatever. The offense. Sometimes the offense was literally somebody thought somebody said something they weren't really saying. Another rabbit trail, just kind of ADHD moment here with me. It is a second draft thought that I have refined over the years. A really helpful thing to do when you're communicating with people is simply say, what did you hear me say? What did you just hear me say? Earlier in our episode, I was getting really intense on the idea of second drafts. And in my mind, I was thinking, somebody might have heard me say, I'm not allowed to speak until I wrote a second draft of my thoughts. And that's absolutely not what I was saying. But I've had enough conversations to know somebody who watches, if enough people watch this, somebody will think I said that. So again, back to the point. Let's be intentional here. Much of your leadership pain is actually a communication pain in disguise. And so this is one of the greatest investments you can make in your life and in the lives of those around you, both at home, at work, and where you volunteer. Communication is paramount. It's paramount. And most people are not as good of communicators as they think they are. Some people are just really blessed to have great interpreters all around them. So fortunately, and praise God, this is a very fixable problem. It takes a little bit of intentionality, and then it's very fixable. So what do we know today? Most people are not as good at communicating as they think they are, but it's very, 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 very fixable. Saying more does not mean it's clear communication. Sometimes it's saying less, but saying the right words. Sometimes the right word means you say more, but a lot of times the right words mean you say less. What do we know? We know that we should give second draft thoughts, not just first draft thoughts. We know that we'll be better at that if we understand how we process information. And then what do we know? We know that communication needs to scale as our team and organization grows because we care about our people, and clarity is kindness. You might be pretty close to breaking through one of your leadership ceilings right now because you're going to get better at your communication, and so am I. And we're going to praise God together as He uses our communication to bless the people around us, and maybe even use our communication for the gospel, the good news of Jesus, that Jesus loved the world so much that He came into this world to die for the sins of the world, so whoever believes in Him will not perish but have everlasting life. And if you're watching this and you don't know Jesus as Lord and Savior, I would absolutely love to chat with you about that. And so drop a comment or shoot us a message and let's talk about that. Let's keep communicating. Maybe do me a favor and communicate by dropping a comment or sharing this and leaving a summary of what you loved about it in your sharing. But either way, peace.